there is every year at NBA All-Star Weekend, there's this event called NBA Tech Summit. Now it's an off-the-record event, so I can't even talk about what happened inside of it, right? You have to be invited specifically. I know journalists who've been covering the NBA for 20 years that still don't get invited to Tech Summit. You'll have CEOs of the biggest tech companies that you can imagine that are there talking about how technology works with sports and things of that nature, right? But the video that the NBA put out of the robots working with the Warriors, that was the only piece of information that came out of Tech Summit that was available to made publicly. And I asked, because it was kind of presented, I don't know if you saw it. Well, of course you saw it. It was presented almost like an SNL sketch. Like it had this office feeling.
Agreed.
And I wasn't sure if it was real or
Agreed.
not.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay?
Yeah.
The tone of it, the way the players were talking. So I asked them, and they basically said, well, this is more of an idea or a concept of what's happening, and it was meant to be tongue-in-cheek. But, we haven't, those robots are not creating a 2-3 zone and playing against the players. That's not happening. But they didn't present it as, hey, this could be the future. They were presented as like, this is what's happening now, but it was like The Office presented it. So, for sure, there are robots and robotics happening behind the scenes, but from my knowledge, I don't believe, and I did ask people, they've never seen those robots actually on campus proper doing what they're doing.
He is a friend of the show, and you have most likely seen his work on YouTube covering not only Apple products, but other tech news and reviews. We have the pleasure in welcoming back Brian Tong onto Hoopsology. Welcome back, Brian.
What's up, guys? Good to be here. Good to be here.
Thanks for joining us. Really appreciate it. So let's hop into it. And I want to talk about the Apple Vision Pro. Just selfishly, I had the chance to try it out a few months ago, and I remember what you said, and I was originally skeptical. My vision's terrible with wearing glasses, and I went to the Apple store here in Colorado, tried it, and I became a believer. Can't afford it, but I can see the technology, and I see this as the future. So you've had a year with this product overall. Before we jump into the Apple Vision Pro and the NBA, just as a device in general, 1 year about in use. What is your overall opinion of the product? And do you have that same, I guess, not anticipation, but expectations and positive feelings as you did before and now? Like, what is kind of your reflection point?
Well, what I like is when my review that I initially do after using it for a few weeks holds true to a year later. And pretty much everything I said in my review is not pretty much everything has stayed on point. It's the technology is top of class, right? We've never seen anything like this, never experienced anything like this. But the headset over time is too heavy. It's also too expensive. And it needs more different experiences. They're getting more content, more immersive video and new apps. But all those things still hold true today. So even for someone who reviews tech, who has the Apple Vision Pro, I learned I had to actually leave it on my coffee table out there in order for me to use it like frequently. If I put in that bag and put it away in the corner, it doesn't come out, right? And so that tells you that A, there's not enough content generating to support this, and B, it's just not that easy of a device to just put on at any time and use, much like, it's a phone or a laptop. So there's human behavior and convenience that also factors into this. But, I'm glad you got to try it out because it is an out-of-the-world experience, but it's just not ready for the general consumer yet, and it still has to get a lot better.
Is Apple supporting it? And along with that, the developers from a sports standpoint. So with NBA League Pass, I recently saw a video that's kind of going viral now. It's alpha in terms of the development of the tabletop, I guess we call it integration. And that seems somewhat promising. I'm a little bit skeptical in terms of this. I just want to see the game. I don't need to see avatars playing. Like, I just show me the actual footage, but it seemed cool. But it gave me some hope that they're developing and creating new innovations for League Pass on Apple Vision Pro. I'm just curious, has there been other innovations that's really the NBA and Apple kept up in terms of providing new innovations for this new endeavor, you think?
So I guess first, there's kind of two parts of things that you talked about. If we talk about the tabletop experience and apps doing more. For people that aren't as familiar, essentially you can watch the game, but below you is an actual representation of the players, semi-rendered like 3D mannequins, not actual players fully rendered out. And so you can follow the game. It's just another way to deliver the game in a different way. But the reality is that although cool, most of us are watching the game itself. And the only thing that would kind of take us away from looking at the actual game being played is if that tabletop were the real players in 3D spatial, fully rendered. And all I can say to that is I've seen things that would point us to that direction. But that's all I can say before I can't say anymore. And so I would say that you're on the right track of, and I've seen it. So that's happening. From a developer standpoint, there haven't been many quote unquote killer apps that have risen from the first time. We have more developers coming out with more apps. I think really what has been most compelling is the immersive movies that Apple has co-produced, and then a lot of the immersive, and even just 3D movies that you can watch. I think it is the best 3D video experience, but you have to wear a headset. It's heavy, right? You don't wear it over time. It arguably is probably the best like lie down experience, right? Because you don't have to support all that weight on your head. But I think this is a testing ground for them. We've seen and heard what other companies like Meta is doing. If for listeners that haven't had a chance to look up Meta Orion, that's kind of their idea of this augmented reality glasses. Not the same fidelity of video, but more about overlays and interactivity. Everyone's still trying to figure this space out, quite honestly. So there is no clear winner right now. Apple seems to be angling toward delivering immersive media content, which is a differentiator, but we still don't have enough of it, right? We need more. This needs to be like a water hose of arguably a YouTube level type amount of content to keep us engaged, in addition to the headset getting lighter, in addition to the headset getting less expensive. So from an app standpoint, you're seeing little nuggets here, little pieces of the puzzle, but it still hasn't clicked yet. And I'm everyone that has one would argue the same thing.
Brian, you just mentioned like getting lighter and less expensive. I mean, we saw that happen with cell phones, way back. I remember my first cell phone and then what that has grown into. I mean, do you expect that same trend basically to happen in this VR and this Apple Vision Pro type of world?
Yeah, 100%. So Matt, think about this, right? Remember the Saved by the Bell Zach Morris satellite phone? I mean, this was a clunker.
Of course.
It was I don't even know if my palm could fit around it, right? That's what a cell phone used to be. And now look at what they are, right? Now this takes 20 years, 30 years to get to that point, right? It will get there, and I think because we are in a more like instant gratification, show me now society more than ever before. People think this stuff is going to happen in 2 years. It happens where you see jumps every 5 years, and all of a sudden from year 5 to 10 to 15, all of a sudden you're like, oh my gosh, we're here now. So it is going to get there. I mean, we've even seen a good example is there's a product. They are not Apple Vision Pros, and they're also not Meta glasses, but there's a product from a company, and there's several competitors called Xreal, which is basically sunglasses that have video players in them. But when you're looking up that close at 1080p, this is a really crisp image, and it's basically a video player in a form factor of sunglasses and high fidelity. Like I take them with me on long trips on planes to watch movies, and they're only around, I think they're around $400, but they serve one purpose. Whether you plug in like a game console, like a Steam Deck, or your iPhone or an Android phone, you can watch movies or play video games on a massive screen in front of you because you're looking through glasses. So that's an indication of how things are also moving, moving in that direction as well. I have them back here, but I'd have to, hold on, I'm going to say. Good quick grab.
I want to see them.
This is what these Xreal glasses look like, okay? Looks like sunglasses. Here you can see, you might be able to see there's like a little like kind of clearer prism here. That's where the image is projected. So this is what we're getting at. Look, when I wear these do not look funky. They look pretty normal. So this is kind of a product that tells me we're in between and getting there slowly but surely. And they exist.
Wow, I've got a long flight coming up. I might need to look into those.
So, Alan, they have an option to support prescription glasses like lenses to overlay. They're called. I'll give you more information, but they're called the X Real ones, and they're legit.
I like that. That's really cool because that's anytime you're like watching something on a plane or something like that, you're kind of leaned over and then my shoulder goes out because I'm old, and so it's just it doesn't quite work for me. I think it was really interesting where we talked about like the difference between like the immersive versus the overlays. I'm personally I'm really interested in like the overlay stuff because like for me watching a game, it's very much like, wait, did he play here? Did she go there? What college did they go to? How, all that kind of stuff. And so having that without me having to grab like my iPad or my phone would be really cool. So what is this like a VHS versus Betamax kind of thing between these two, or will they be complementary?
I think they're complementary. This is more like apples to oranges at the moment, right? There's people that are trying out which product makes the most sense. I will tell you this from an overlay standpoint, what I think is most intriguing and exciting is I did a story with the NBA about their Hawkeye camera system. You guys might be familiar with it, but this is a camera system that tracks all the players on the court at the same time. It breaks them down into 29 different body parts, so we're talking about joints. It really knows every motion they're doing. The fact that that camera system can detect all those things and is also, they haven't confirmed it, but probably the camera system that is used to deliver that tabletop experience of the mannequins that you saw, that also when you connect the dots here, that camera system can also identify every player on the court. And what that means is if you were wearing glasses that could look at a player and have some stats or identify them, that camera system knows who's who, right? They know Steph Curry's number 30. It knows, LeBron James is 23. And so when you in this virtual space and it has a reference of where you might be sitting and looking, you would be able to see that, like stat overlays, right? Information about bio stuff. That's cool, right? Or what colleges they went to or who they played with, what teams they were on, right? Some of those interconnections that is fun with NBA players, who played with who, where, and when, who coached who. Things like that for the junkies. I think this is where an app made for that type of consumption definitely serves a purpose to the NBA community, which has an insatiable appetite for anything NBA related.
Brian, I want to just get your thoughts on All Star Weekend. You had a chance to attend, and before we get negative and point to all kind of the problems with All Star Weekend, I want to get to another aspect of the weekend that's not really covered too much. That's from a technology perspective, and the NBA released some footage about the Golden State Warriors, how they incorporate robots in terms of helping Steph Curry warm up. What were your observations from a technology perspective of NBA All-Star Weekend in terms of the NBA? We talked about last year, the LED court, the jerseys changing colors. Were there anything else new that they introduced this year?
So I would say, I was there. The NBA sent me out there to kind of see what was going on from a tech standpoint. I would argue from how about this, a front-facing looking at, hey, look at what we're doing with tech. They didn't do as much as they did last year. I mean, the court was incredible. I think we should have seen the court again, like with another iteration of it, or different graphics, or different, use the court again, but in different ways. And we didn't see that. There is every year at NBA All-Star Weekend, there's this event called NBA Tech Summit. Now it's an off the record event, so I can't even talk about what happened inside of it, right? You have to be invited specifically. I know journalists who've been covering the NBA for 20 years that still don't get invited to Tech Summit. You'll have CEOs of the biggest tech companies that you can imagine that are there talking about how technology works with sports and things of that nature, all right? But the video that the NBA put out of the robots working with the Warriors, that was the only piece of information that came out of Tech Summit that was available to me publicly. And I asked, because it was kind of presented, I don't know if you saw it. Well, of course you saw it. It was presented almost like an SNL sketch. Like it had this office feeling.
Agreed.
And I wasn't sure if it was real or
Agreed.
not.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay?
Yeah.
The tone of it, the way the players were talking. So I asked them, and they basically said, well, this is more of an idea or a concept of what's happening, and it was meant to be tongue-in-cheek, but, we haven't, those robots are not creating a 2-3 zone and playing against the players. That's not happening. But they didn't present it as, hey, this could be the future. They were presented as like, this is what's happening now, but it was like The Office presented it. So, for sure, there are robots and robotics happening behind the scenes, but from my knowledge, I don't believe, and I did ask people, they've never seen those robots actually on campus proper doing what they're doing, right? Like definitely the Boston Boston Dynamics, the ones that look like dogs, they aren't there. The 2-3 zone robots, they're not there. That one that had it catching balls and shooting them, that looks like something that was real, but then the way they talked about it made it like it was a joke. So, I've never seen anyone publish any document or even report that any of those robots even exist in their current workouts today.
What a bizarre strategy.
No, that's why it kind of threw me off.
Yeah.
I'm the tech guy, and I'm like, wait, was that real or not? And they laughed when I asked them the question because they thought it was funny too. And they're like, so that the ball catcher and shooter seemed real, but again, I don't know. I didn't even get a straight answer, guys. Right? So, but to get back to the root of the question, I think even though it happened in Silicon Valley, they didn't showcase nearly as much tech as we saw before in the previous All-Star weekends.
I'm curious. I don't even know how much you can share with us, Brian, and you can hush me if you want. But I'm just wondering, do you see like a mix of things that are geared towards both consumers and then also towards human performance or like team performance when you're looking at, the tech summit or otherwise? Or is it primarily geared towards the consumer and, in increasing revenue from different mediums of consumption?
I think there's one way to look at this that they talked about, or that has been like swirling in conversation, is how technology plays a role in recovery for these athletes, specifically recovery. And what I mean by that is, we have products like the Aura Ring that can basically sense some of your biorhythms and your biometrics. There's even simple apps like I'm not sponsored by any of these companies, but like Headspace, which is like a meditation or mind clearing app. Like, quite honestly, surprisingly, that's actually a tool that a lot of players actually use to calm themselves down before the game, to get them, just focused and centered, quite honestly, with all the chaos and stuff that's happening around them. Then you also have all the data and analytics that a lot of these teams themselves are collecting from their players and about their players. And then on top of that, you have all the analytics that Hawkeye camera system that is installed in every NBA arena. All teams can access that data, so they can see how much distance Steph Curry covered in a single game, and then average that out and be like, okay, we need to reduce your minutes, or we need to give you a rest on this day because you're using too much of your tread. So there's so many different touch points, and even touch points that we don't necessarily know about, that is constantly evolving. I know everyone talks about AI, but I think here it's more collecting the trends and the data and giving kind of bullet points of salient data that a player can be like, okay, I'm doing this too much, I'm doing this too less, and then working on that, whether it's from a playing standpoint or recovery standpoint. That Hawkeye system, like everything that you guys can imagine, it counts. It can count how many passes, the pass before the actual scoring pass, right? It can measure defensive radius of how much space a rebounder takes and why they're so effective. They may not be the tallest guy. Kevon Looney is a great example. He stays to the floor, but damn, does that guy rebound like a crazy mofo. So these are analytics that maybe support or let you understand why a player is so good in different ways. And that type of data, along with this health biometrics, they're getting learnings from this. And so that's actively happening, and they mentioned and talked about that, but it's not consumer front facing either, right? That's just all for the benefit of the players and the teams, but that's actively happening right now.
That's really interesting because it's interesting to me for the intersection between player health and technology in ways that you're not thinking of. And I think my wife is a therapist, mental health therapist, and she uses machines, technology, light bars, binaural beats, light and sound in order to rewire people's brains. And I could see something like that right at some point, if somebody's in a shooting slump, or something like that, you could maybe go in there and rewire their brains a little bit. I mean, I know that's very like Blade Runner, but is that kind of the area you think maybe they're looking at as far as like the health and mental aspects of technology with the NBA?
Yeah, Alan, I mean, I get what you're saying. You're not saying rewire their brain, but maybe some sort of trigger to redirect their slump in a positive thinking, or right, like kind of change the direction of that ship. I don't 100% know. Kind of what I talked about is what I know is actively happening, but they also like allude to other things happening behind the scenes, even working directly with technology companies to optimize training. Even this whole what do we call it? The word's so online, but when players are resting to just resting and sitting out
Load
games, right?
management.
Load management. Thank you. Right. So that's something that never existed. Old school basketball heads that watched in the 80s and 90s, like we did, were like, "What are you doing?" They never had to do that. And then in a flip side, we're seeing more injuries than ever, right? To players. So is this? And they haven't actually, to be honest with you, we still haven't really gotten answers. Is this because players are starting at such a younger age and wearing their bodies down by the time they get to the league that more injuries are happening? Is it because they're not always being active in doing this load management? It's kind of stuttering the progression of their body, staying actively at that kind of peak performance because these guys are literally like cars. We don't even have the answers for that. And so I think that science learnings should help us with that, but it also there's not it's not always just directly related to science. Just like plus minus is not directly related to how well you actually play on the court. There's a lot of other factors, right? So it's hard to say that there's really a true answer, but I think there's a lot of data points that they're trying to collect.
So there's been a lot of complaints this season about low ratings, too many threes, and from a technological standpoint, I think this points to analytics, right? I mean, three is more than two. It's just a logical shot. And I just think, in terms of innovation, whether you move back to 3-point line or you introduce a 4-point shot or any kind of wacky innovation that might come, technology is always going to be at the forefront in terms of finding ways to be efficient for each player. So is there kind of any way, I guess, to, solve this? Because, when I was growing up, dunking was the issue, right? There's too many dunks. And so now people are shooting, and now it's just like, okay, there's too many threes. Like, what do we want? Like, if it was too many mid-range shots, I think people would be complaining too many mid-range shots. So I guess my question is that, well, the evolution of technology, especially with the NBA being so aggressive with their Hawkeye technology and other future innovations, well, I think, is that at odds with just the fan entertainment experience, do you think?
So I'd love for you guys to chime in after I chime in about this, just like the quality of the game and what we're seeing and whatnot, because I know you guys talk about, but I'm curious to hear what you have to say. We've been guided this way of how basketball should be played analytically now. And that's happened since Daryl Morey, and it's kind of evolved, and now we have a lot of stat guys. And yes, three is better than two. I think also, I've thought about this, is that sometimes it just takes a player to change the system. Like Steph Curry is the one player that made people who shouldn't shoot threes think it's okay to shoot threes. Even though three is better than two, more people shoot threes than ever because Steph Curry did it at such a great high rate and efficiently. Damian Lillard right behind him, Klay Thompson. You can name players like this. When there was too much dunking, the NBA was more physical. We had a player like Shaq, a once-in-a-generation type player, other than maybe Wilt, dominate the game that way. So to me, there's players that actually buck the analytic trends right now. I think Shea Gilgeous-Alexander is the player who's effective in the mid-range, can drive. His three is maybe not the best, but he still has a three. But he's kind of, him and DeMar DeRozan, who's a throwback, those are kind of anti-analytics type players. But look how dominant Shea is. That kind of changes the mind of how basketball can still be played. Now it's like, oh, we can't. The mid-range is effective. Maybe young people see what Shea does, and this takes years to blossom. Then you start seeing maybe more players with a more effective mid-range game. So part of me says that it's the generational type influential players that also dictate the direction of the game. If Shea was dropping 50 and it was only making maybe 2 or 3 threes in that time, that tells you the three is important, but you can still be extremely effective and efficient without a 3-point shot. So I think what I miss the most is seeing players with different styles. It tends to feel like a lot of players are 3-and-D guys now. You have one star, a lot of 3-and-D guys, and floor spacers, and it all looks the same, and sometimes it looks better than others because of how many shots people make. But I do feel like it's the type of players that appear on the court and end up rising that can help dictate and kind of buck those analytical trends. I don't know what you guys think about the quality of the game or what you like or don't like or where it stands.
Yeah,
Yeah, I'll
go ahead, Alan. Go ahead.
yeah, I'll pop. I'm an old head, so I've been watching since the '80s and passionately since the '90s. And I I like the game now. It's fun to watch. I like the ball movement. I like watching guys, do that. I agree with your point that it's become a little homogenous. So I like it when there's players who are outliers. Honestly, it's probably why I'm the biggest Amon Thompson fan in the
Mm.
world. He he plays completely different than the current zeitgeist. Same with Shea. I, and it feels like it goes through these things, right? So in the 80s and 90s, you had the big men. Every team had a Rick Smits, a Patrick Ewing, and an Akeem Olajuwon, right? And that's who you were trying to be. And then you kind of got into the bully ball of the late 90s, early 2000s, and that. And then you wanted the power in the center position, right? Shaq, and then it's evolved, and I think it'll bounce back to something else entirely different that'll come as a big surprise to all of us, but it'll still be enjoyable. So it's hard for me to compare the games, the different genres, but I enjoy the quality of today's game. I just wish there were more outliers playing the game.
Ironically, I mean, the best player in the league right now, I think it's hard to argue against Jokic. And he's in some ways like that new evolution of the big man, but he's also kind of a throwback in that he really is getting a lot of stuff done down in the post primarily, especially with the way he rebounds and everything. But I think just to 2 points that came to mind. There were a lot of Michael Jordan impersonators that were not not great watches, I'll say, and I don't want to name anyone or call anyone out, but so when you have like a Steph Curry impersonation, and that's like the greatest 3-point shooter of all time, there's going to be a little lull from that, I think. I think also with analytics and like you said, Justin, 3 being more than 2, just plain and simple, that helps you win the contest in front of you, but it's not as pleasing of a competition to watch all the time if it's an exchange of 3-point shots. It's not as in your face as the duels in the post or going up for a dunk and someone trying to contest that, blocking that shot. It just, I think, doesn't translate as well visually to the viewers. Doesn't mean the current product isn't entertaining, but I do think there's a case that there's many nights where it's less entertaining than what it used to be. You had a little bit more of your classic duel, a little bit easier to understand, I think, for casual sports fans watching it.
No, completely true. Brian, all right, let's get negative. You're actually
We're not negative. We're just keeping it fair. We're just talking. We're
keeping
speaking
it
our minds
real.
Call it
here.
as we see it.
as we see it. You were there live. You have a live perspective, so I want to get your thoughts on just NBA All-Star Weekend overall from a in-arena perspective. Just kind of your impressions overall. I don't want to point you any other direction.
Yeah,
Just kinda
yeah.
get your feelings on it.
So from an in-arena perspective, I went to all 3 days at Chase Center. So that means the Rising Stars, it was the Skills Challenge Day, and the actual game. Well, of course, as a fan, it's great to be there. The things that stuck out to me, if I would say that the Skills Challenge night was actually a success. I think Mac McClung saved that night. And remember, the Dunk Fest actually started off pretty bad. The first 3 dunkers had multiple attempts. It's always hard to be the first dunker, but they just didn't pull it off. Poor Matthias and even Stephon Castle's first time. It was like, oh man, here we go. If that car dunk wasn't in the first round, I don't know how we'd feel about the Dunk Fest, quite honestly. And Mac McClung has made it actually worth watching again for the 3rd year in a row, surprisingly. That was the big takeaway. I think the fans, the biggest takeaway actually from All-Star, I don't know if you could tell from watching it, but I know for a fact tickets to get in, especially in the Bay Area, were very expensive. We're talking about people that had to spend over $1,000, $2,000 to get to the lower level, even upper level being 800 plus for a skills challenge night. Okay. Therefore, That meant that there were not that many people, right? And it probably looked to you guys like 50% filled. It was honestly arguably less than that on that Saturday night. I was surprised, right? I was like, Woo! The night before, where with the it was not good. Okay, and then I think about how the NBA, they want to be accessible. I don't know if it was the NBA that set the prices or the Chase Center that set it, but this was not an accessible event, and therefore also took away some of that energy that you kind of wanted to feel. Then when we go to the final night where the tournament play was, I will say the first two games definitely felt more competitive, but the first thing that I said as the games were going on, maybe 10 minutes, I was like, why is there less basketball and more of this show? And it seemed like everyone at home really felt the fact that there was barely any basketball, whereas we're in the building, and that's the first thing I texted to my friend. I'm like, are you guys watching that much basketball? Because it feels like there's barely any basketball being played. Later on, we find out basically it was like 35 minutes of basketball versus 3 hours of programming. That is horrible. I mean, if the NBA wants people to watch, competitive or not competitive, you cannot have 3 hours of programming around 35 minutes of basketball. And when we then tie things in a bow, I think that ultimately this whole problem of being competitive, as a fan, I think we all know this, it comes down to the players. The players have to care, and it's embarrassing that they don't care. And maybe there's too much. I'm never going to take away anyone's money, but maybe they're just getting paid so much that it just doesn't matter anymore to them. And it's sad. It's a sad state. I love LeBron, but I would argue this whole not caring about the All-Star game as much might have been sparked by him and his generation where they all became friends, because Jordan and Kobe were competitors and they didn't like all the players that were on the court. Everyone likes each other now. And I'm not saying it's a problem to like people, but it's a problem when the product suffers because you just aren't even competitive. Steph Curry, LeBron, KD can set the table. Even I remember watching Wemby, he was pissed when they lost. He was pissed when people didn't care on defense. So you've got to get, maybe, again, we talk about specific type of players, a Shea or a Wemby as they get older and more respected and rise in the hierarchy of NBA players. If they're the ones that start making it competitive, then I welcome it with open arms. But it takes the players to give a care, and the ones that are setting the example do not right now.
I wonder if we just get Rudy Gobert on the opposing team. That would bring the hate.
It's just, or like good guys versus bad guys. Bring in Dillon Brooks, bring in Draymond. Just get those guys. Everyone loves to hate, but you love to have on your team. Put them on a team.
Yeah.
I'm sure you guys have talked about, but it was overall, I would say the last day was a major letdown. I left that really being actually annoyed as a fan. The Skills Challenge Dunk Fest 3-point shootout that lifted. I would maybe give this All-Star weekend from a basketball perspective, not from what it did for the California and the Bay Area, but from a basketball perspective, maybe like a 6 if I'm being nice, 6.5 maybe. I just felt that, yeah. I love it, but I don't even know if I can say 7, to be honest.
Well, that's all really well said. I think you make great points, and I completely agree about the competitive nature of the whole weekend in general. Just kind of being gone, and you can feel it through the TV screen, and it's not hard to see what's going on. And I think everyone is really happy that the players are all doing really well. But when you think, All-Star Weekend is the ultimate fan service. It's just a shame that I think for the last 5 years, maybe arguably even longer, it's just fallen flat for consecutive years. I wanted to ask, you mentioned how shocked you were at how empty the arena actually was compared to what you were expecting. Were there any other big differences that you kind of noticed being there in person compared to watching the TV product in years past? Anything else that stood out or surprised you?
I think maybe a realization is that it is fun actually watching the 3-point contest and the Dunk Fest and the Skills Challenge on TV. I think the presentation in between that and the camera angles you get actually make it more enjoyable, right? Because when you're sitting in a stand and watching a 3-point shootout, you can see it going, but it's nice when it changes the camera shots. You're hearing kind of fun commentary on top of that. Even hearing commentary on top of the Dunk Fest is fun. You kind of have to figure things out while you're watching it. You see it, but the only reference you have is like looking up at the big board. So I think that specific night is actually better on TV than in person. And then I think the actual game, as long as it's a game, with some competition. Should be fun in person. I mean, there were moments that felt a little competitive in the earlier rounds, which I liked. But then when we got to the final game, they scored 10 points and we have like a half-hour break. Like, what are we doing here? It was really hard as a fan inside there. I can only imagine. I know it feels longer when you're not in the arena. It must have felt like you guys probably were just like, this is unacceptable. I don't know.
Yeah, that's completely how we felt. Just totally ridiculous. And I echo your point with just the ticket prices too. We had a journalist that covered the All-Star game in Utah, and he said the same thing just in terms of your common fan being priced out and going to the event. So it's just something I think the NBA needs to address and making it more affordable.
Yeah, when you talk about pricing out, what happened is earlier before All-Star Weekend, like as the festivities were coming up, they were only offering these like NBA entertainment packages. So you couldn't buy a single seat. It was like meet a legend, go to a luncheon, tour the city. And I know for a fact that those packages for upper level were like $2,000 and the packages for lower were $4,000 to $6,000, guys. Right. So, and that's all they were offering until basically I feel like a couple days before then they started putting out individual tickets, which were still at those ridiculous prices. Like, this is a time to feature the game, not gouge people. Like, do that in the finals. Okay, fine, right? Do it during the playoffs. Fine, I kind of get it then. But All-Star, the Bay Area, even the Bay Area, which has a good amount of money, that's still way too expensive. I mean, I saw literally 2 or 3 rows completely empty, and it didn't surprise me because I knew how much prices were, right? It was actually the upper level that you can't see on TV that was actually filled, right? The quote unquote, yeah, the higher upper levels, those are the ones that felt like 80% filled, but lower, it looked like in some areas like ghost towns. It was bad. It was bad. Bad for fans.
Yeah, I've always felt, I mean, I remember going to games as a poor college student and like paying next to nothing to get into games and get pretty decent seats. And it seems like this trend towards corporate sponsorship, and it makes for a bad fan experience in some ways. I remember going to a Mavericks game 20 something years ago, where Kevin Garnett was tearing up the Mavs, and this dude in a suit in front of me is like, "Who is this Kevin Garnett guy? Why is he doing it?" And I'm thinking like, how do you not know? He's one of the most popular players in the league. This is 2002. I mean, come on. I'm going to be like, you need to just leave, go. Not to be a gatekeeper, but I think we're missing out on like the soccer hooligan fans that we should be having in NBA arenas to really make them on edge. I don't think we need to go like Eastern Europe style and throw batteries at players, but what are your thoughts kind of on that pricing and that in just the fan experience?
So I've seen here's 2 really good examples. Think about this. Oakland and the arena versus Chase Center in San Francisco. That went from, it was all about the fans. Pricing, yes, went up as the Warriors got more successful. You saw more Patagonia vests with blue colored long sleeve shirts in the front rows. You did see that more, right? All the tech bros. But if you watch a Warriors game today, a regular that's aired on national TV, the crowd is near dead. It takes 3 Steph Curry 3-pointers for them to get excited. It could be I've tweeted multiple times in the past. It was like a 5-point game with 3 minutes left and people aren't even making noise, right? That it's just what is going on here for one of the best teams at the time, in their era. When you talk about that college rowdiness, I hope you all get a chance to go to Intuit and go see a Clippers game. Whatever, it's an amazing experience where they have the wall, they make those tickets more affordable. I think they're around $80 to $100, and you kind of it's like not a raffle, but a little bit of a lottery, and they only want dedicated fans who are going to be there to get access for it. And it's a first come, first serve seating. So as long as you show up early, you could get really down like 5 rows down, right? All the way up. And that arena is one of the most alive arenas that I've felt organically in a long time in California for a regular season game against a nobody team, right? And not only that, Intuit is just an incredible experience from the technology that's there. We could talk about it another time. It's off the charts, but just from a fan experience without having to game the system or convince them to get excited like a crowd, like college rowdy, Intuit is the best place. You have, arenas like in Indiana has a great crowd. Sacramento in general has a great crowd. I think Sacramento's crowd has kind of tamed down a little bit though over the years. But those type of crowd, Boston is always going to be extremely wild, like wild. But those types of crowds, you are far and few between these days. But what Intuit's doing is kind of like, I'm like, oh, it is still there. You just have to make it affordable, right? It's literally it to the real fans. Other teams need to start doing this. It's much like soccer where that has a dedicated fan section that is just rowdy as hell. That's what they need to capture. It doesn't have to be the whole arena, but you create a section like that. I think it'll serve you well and the whole fan base well.
Final question on that front. You bring up the Intuit Dome. I bring up my wrestling fandom and watching Raw, like never mind just the wrestling part, from a presentation part, it looks spectacular. And I'm just wondering from other arenas being built, do you see other arenas kind of taking that playbook? Because visually it looks sensational, different than any other arena. And that includes from a Clippers game as well. Just the viewer at home, the Clippers game looks different than other games around the NBA. And I'm curious to see, do you think from a technology perspective, the Intuit Dome, they're onto something here in terms of kind of, this might be the blueprint for other arenas, kind of taking their technology and incorporating it in future iterations of arenas around the country.
Okay, so Justin, now that you asked about it, I'm going to talk about some of the tech that makes this arena special and crazy, okay? So first of all, you normally get a ticket scanned on your phone. You do have to sign up for a clip, and create a profile in the Clippers app. It asks you to take a photo of yourself, okay? And then it also asks you for your credit card information. Now, you have to be okay with this. But once you do that, you don't even scan a ticket when you walk into the arena. There's cameras around that see your face, and then there's someone at the front with a tablet, and they basically, the camera sees their face, it shows up on their tablet, and they go, Brian? I go, yes, you can come on in. So there's no actual ticket transaction, okay? That's the first thing. Then you walk around the arena, you want food? Oh, guess what? They know you, again, it's creepy, but it's cool. There's cameras around the food shops. I walk in, I grab a hot dog, a drink, I grab whatever I want, and then I walk out, and it automatically knows who I am, knows what I'm picking up, and then charges me. So you never take out your wallet. You never take out your wallet, and you walk right in because it does a face scan. Then when you get to your seats, okay, the arena itself has this incredible halo billboard. I don't know how much you're able to see it, but it's a 360 wrap, similar to what's at SoFi Stadium in the football field, but you can see on the inside and the outside. The graphics are incredible, but then when you talk about the fan experience, yes, you have the wall, which is loud, as rowdy as hell, but each seat, like on the chair, has a light on it. So when you saw all that crazy lighting at Raw, every seat has a light that can be controlled and changes colors. Every seat has a USB-C port to charge your phone for you to stay there. And then the kicker, every seat on it has think like a video game controller, like the red, yellow, blue, green buttons on it. And to keep people engaged and not leaving and not going on the phones, in between breaks where we normally see the trampoline group in the stadium, right? They'll have these mini game presentations that for example, one is they show a couple and you vote, are they friend, boyfriend, girlfriend, or married? And people vote, and then they show the results. There's a trivia one, or how about this? Kind of like Simon Says, where they show a pattern up on the billboard, and you have to type that pattern. Now, eventually, people get eliminated. How do you know they get eliminated? The lights on their chairs go away so you can see who's still in the game. And then eventually, you play this 3 times or 4 times, and the last round is who does it fastest and accurate. And you can see who wins because there's the only chair with the light on in the arena. This is just interactivity that you just can't get anywhere else, that is just so engaging and so fun. And then even their their Halo board, because it's a wraparound graphics, they have space. We normally see points, rebounds, assists. They show team rebounds. They show team, points in the paint, all types of the nerdy, geeky extra stats that we like to see. Fast break points, turnovers converted, all that stuff is on there. So Steve Ballmer made an arena thinking about fan engagement for basketball specifically. And, I don't know who the next arena is going to be. I just don't think they'd be willing maybe to invest, but it is one of the greatest sport experiences that I've ever been to. I've been to maybe 3 Clipper games because it's just so fun and engaging. I brought my nieces and they were like, "This is awesome!" Like they had fun, even though they weren't rooting for even any of the teams because they're not their home team. So I think that they know exactly what they're doing. I even heard and know that, again, creepy. There's microphones that can at least measure the volume level of how much you're screaming, and they do audio decibel, like, oh, fans get loud, and they could then identify which section is the loudest and reward that section with that prize, right? Just so much stuff. There's probably other things they haven't told us about, right? But it's an experience like no other. So when you start being around it, and then someone who's a tech fan, and you can kind of see how it really just adding to a fan experience and not being tech in your face. It's incredible, man. So that's cool for me that you just felt that the arena felt different by looking at it on TV through the raw stream. But it's like all those things I said, like, right, you wouldn't know that unless I told you that's exactly what's happening, right? And yeah, the chair, the light colors on the chairs change as well, right? There's just it's incredible, man.
It's just so cool and refreshing to hear of a way of actually rewarding you for being a fan rather than, like in the NFL and probably in other leagues too, like, oh, you should be so lucky that you get to pay $500 for these personal seat licenses or whatever to have the right to buy tickets. I mean, this is at least something. I mean, yes, you're spending money, you're supporting the team, but it's nice to have these little built-in rewards, just to be there and be a fan.
Yeah. I think, we weren't sure what the Clippers were going to be like this year. Projections were they're going to be a pretty mediocre team, quite honestly. But right, Norman Powell has just had an incredible season. They've just figured out how to play. James Harden has been having a great season too in general. So the Clippers, right? I think, are they around the 6th seed or so, somewhere around there, maybe even higher? I don't know exactly the stands, but I know they're above that. That was not expected. So the fact that they also have a great team to watch, I think, also elevates it. Because if they were a garbage team, the fan experience could be great, but there's only so much you can get from it. It's all this whole ecosystem of things. But if you guys plan to come out here, you have to let me know. We'll go to a game because it's amazing. It's amazing. It's worth going to just once.
Well, we'll take you up on that for sure. Brian, thank you very much for the time. Really appreciate it. Please let our audience know where they can find you on social media. Do you have any other projects? I know a lot of it's maybe top secret that you got going on. Anything kind of sneak peeks you kind of let us know about? That'd be much appreciated. But thanks for spending the time.
No. I mean, I love coming on here. It's so great to talk with you guys. I mean, we've been doing this for a while, so it's always fun. People that want to check out kind of tech and geek culture, it's just youtube.com/Brian Tong, or if you punch in my name in Twitter or Instagram, it'll eventually show me. Stuff that I'm working on, it's, there's some products that are getting reviewed. Really this year, I wanted to focus on trying to do more like tech sports type stories. And so it doesn't happen all the time, but maybe it happens once every few months instead of none months. And so that's really what I'm like working towards, in addition to like gadget coverage around phones and tablets and all that stuff. But yeah, people can check me out there, and thanks for having me all the time. I love it.
Likewise, thanks for taking the time. I know you're extremely busy. We enjoyed.
We all are, Justin. Come on, we all are. Let's stop. We all got life going on.
Must appreciate it. Thanks, Brian.
All right, thanks, guys.
Thank you.